Coming to you from the Deep South, this is the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast. High-impact leadership is not reserved for leaders, and it has nothing to do with your position, title, or rank. However, it does have everything to do with your character. It's time to climb to the next level and beyond, personally and professionally. Now, let's start making it happen with your host, Mac Story.
Hello everyone, Mac Story back today for part 2 from there to here. Some more about my story and my journey into the blue collar manufacturing world. So thank you for listening to the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast. And this show again is for everyone in the blue collar industry. Those on the front lines, those at the top, those in the middle, those supporting them. And you're all going to get some value from this because leadership applies to everyone. But again, these first few episodes, I'm kind of just telling my story. So anyone listening today or anyone who wants to go back in the future who subscribes later on down the road can go back and learn a little bit about who I am, where I come from, that sort of thing. So in part 1, I left off at being laid off from my first manufacturing job. So basically, had worked at that company for a year. Learned a few things and got laid off. Took me several months before I got my next job, but I was able to find a job in Auburn, Alabama. So I went from Montgomery, Alabama to Auburn, Alabama and started working for a company that actually produces couplings. The other company produced steering knuckles, and I didn't really describe that well, but it was on the big trucks, there's an I-beam axle underneath the front, and then the wheels are on the end of the axle. And the steering knuckles that I was producing went on the end of the I-beam axle, connected to those, and all the lug studs, the studs that you put the wheel on, actually go through the knuckle that I was building. So that's what I was producing before. Now in my second job, or my second company, we actually made couplings for the power transmission industry. Basically, if you got some type of shaft, electric motor driving some type of shaft, we made the couplings that would go on the end of the two shafts so that you could connect the shafts to transmit the torque from one shaft to the other. And the plant that I was working in, we made couplings pretty much from about a couple of inches in diameter up to a couple of feet in diameter. So some really small couplings and some really large couplings and all different types. So I got hired there, and it was September 25th, 1989. I went several months without a job, but finally I was able to get that job. And I started out actually on a huge band saw. The saw would actually cut steel bars from the smallest ones, again around 2 inches. And as far as the bars were concerned, we went up to about 18-inch diameter. So that was my first job there, was running this big band saw. It actually was 2 of them side by side. And I would just chop all different size bars into different lengths, and then they would go on pallets and get moved down the line so that actually they got stored outside, but then they'd get brought back in later, and the CNC lathes, they would start turning them down into the coupling, kind of the raw material for the couplings is what I was doing. And also we had a large drill press that would drill up to about a 3-inch hole, and some of the couplings, we called them slugs when they were just cut, when the bars were just cut into chunks. We call those slugs. So sometimes I had to drill different size, different diameter holes into the slug. So that's how I moved from my first plant to the next, was by being laid off. I worked at this company I'm telling you about now for 14 years. Worked there until February. Actually, I resigned in January or February of 2003. So I worked in this one company I'm telling you about now. This is going to be kind of part 2. I'm going to get you through this company from there to here, and then we'll move on in part 3 to the next organization. So during this time, I worked on those saws. Later on, I moved across the aisle actually to a twin spindle CNC lathe, where we would bring the slugs back in on a pallet, and I would put those into the lathe and turn them down. We turn down one side. We call that first operation. Then they'd go get piled in a stack, and then we'd run all of those parts they'd bring them back, we'd flip them over and finish turning the other side. So done that for a while. Then the next job, I got put into a small sail, and basically we were taking the couplings and boring a hole through them, and then in a drill press, and then put them into a CNC single spindle horizontal lathe, and would go in and bore out the inside, finish turn it. I should say I drilled a hole, we'd go back through there and finish rough turn it and finish turn it. And then we had a little tool called a roll mark, and we'd roll on the outside edge on the lip of the coupling. We would put the information, the brand name, the size, and that sort of thing. And then there was another operation that we run separate. We'd take turns running it. We'd take all those couplings with the bored holes in them and put a keyway on the inside. So that was just a kind of a small broach, another oily, nasty job. And we also had a little machine there, drill a hole in it and put a set screw in it. So that was a second operation in that little sail. So I learned to do that. And then by the time I'm telling you now, I'm up to probably around 1995. So those three jobs I just told you about. That was probably my first 5-6 years in that company. And then we started going down the lean path. So the company was moving from traditional manufacturing to lean manufacturing, but they didn't tell us, they didn't do it with us, they done it to us. So they started bringing in the corporate folks and started setting up sales. Instead of standalone machines, they started setting up all throughout the plant, putting a bunch of machines that had been apart. They started putting them together. So I had the opportunity, I was selected to be what we called at the time was a rover. I had to learn to run all of those machines, be able to set them up, be able to operate them by myself. And that took actually a couple of years of training because there were a lot of machines, probably about almost, I would say, 70 machines in that plant. I didn't learn every one of them, but I learned almost every one of them. So after that, then I would help the operators set up their machines when they changed parts. They may have 4 machines to set up, so they'd start on one, I'd start on another. Or if someone was out sick or called in for some reason, vacation or whatever, I may have to step in and run their sale while no one was there. So I had to know how to run them all. So I learned a whole lot during that time. And one thing I learned how to do is I learned about the programs. So I was able to, actually, I bid on a first shift job. So I got on first shift actually operating one of those sales after quite a bit of time of being the rover. So then I became an operator in one of those sales. And the guy before me had complained so much about it, it would never work. It would never work. It would never work. That was all you ever heard. He worked there about 6 months, and then he bid on a big drill press that was still standalone, and he went back to running a single machine. So I bid on that job to get on the first shift. And I have a different attitude. I've always been the type who wants to improve processes, to produce a lot, to show that I know what I'm doing and I can do more than everybody else. And so I went in there with an attitude of I was going to make it work and I was going to improve it because the sale was not performing. So in about 6 months to a year, somewhere in that time frame, I had made so many improvements. The output of that the sale had doubled, not just on my shift, but on every shift. I was making improvements, and I was working with engineering and supervisors and other support people to edit programs and change the programs on the CNC lathes. So because of that, I learned how the programming worked. So when a job come open in the programming department, I bid on it and I was selected. And I got selected over a lot of people who had a lot more experience than me. But one thing about experience is a lot of people have 1 year of experience. So let's say they worked there 5 years. A lot of people have 1 year of experience repeated 5 times. They don't really have 5 years of experience. They have 1 year of experience. But I had moved around so much that during my time, I had many years of experience because I had learned to do so much. So I bid on the programming job. I got that job and real excited to get that. So now I had to learn to program all these CNC machines. And there were a lot of different types with a lot of different control panels. And I was doing the programming. I was doing drafting. I would draft process drawings. I would draft tooling drawings. I would draft chuck setup drawings. So I was doing drafting and programming at that time. So we're up to about 10 minutes here. So I'm going to drop off right here as I moved into the programming job for part 2. So I'll finish up here, and tomorrow we'll pick up on part 3, and I'll start telling you how I moved up from the programming job. And again, this is just to give you some background on how I got to where I am. So later on when I'm telling stories, I can say, hey, go back and listen to that episode, and you can learn what I actually went through and how I got there. So till next time, you guys have a great day.
Make it happen or someone else will. It might as well be you. Are you serious about taking your career and your life to the next level and beyond? Check out Mac Story's Blue Collar Leadership series books and others, now available on audio, along with paperback and ebooks at Amazon, iTunes, and Audible. Please visit bluecollarleadership.com to learn about Mac's books, programs, special offers, certifications, and more. Thank you for listening to the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast.